Chapter 337, Mastermind 4. It was a gamble for Mok Jae-un as well. Strictly speaking, concentrating power into a single point was akin to becoming a sword oneself. So Mok Jae-un was half in doubt whether it would be possible to manifest this using the demonic swords. However, with his understanding of energy heightened after surpassing the wall's wall, Mok Jae-un thought it would be theoretically possible. But there were two problems here. This technique had two glaring weaknesses. Convergence of energy. Concentrating all the energy and power from one's entire body into a single point and focusing it on a sword at a distance was by no means easy. When unleashing it with the body, it could be executed at any time even if there was a burden on the whole body, but it took quite some time to send energy to the demonic swords. Secondly, it's too conspicuous. This was the biggest problem. If enough energy was concentrated to focus power into one point with the demonic swords, the probability of the opponent noticing it would be extremely high. This was especially true for masters of higher realms. Unable to recklessly test this out, Mok Jae-un had no choice but to lure the opponent's senses to focus solely on him. That's why Mok Jae-un created that opportunity. Through continuous extreme high-speed movement, he made Mujin desperate and exert his full strength. With the explosion of the vast natural earth energy shattering the ground and the whirlwind of energy generated by the stances and techniques unleashed by the two superhuman beings, the surroundings were shaken, allowing it to be faintly concealed to a certain degree. But Mok Jae-un didn't stop there. He created a situation that the opponent could predict, directly concentrating power into one point and drawing all attention to himself. That's what being bait meant. Confident of victory, Mujin ultimately let his guard down. And this was the result. Ugh. Mujin's face twisted in pain. Seeing this, Mok Jae-un inwardly clicked his tongue. Although he had intuitively felt that the power would be weaker than when he unleashed it himself, since he had concentrated energy into a single sword to gather his strength, he hadn't expected it to fail to completely penetrate Mujin's body. Or is he that sturdy? In any case, the gamble had succeeded, but it was undoubtedly a technique that was difficult to utilize in many ways. Anyway, with the sword piercing his heart, the match was decided. I should finish it. The match would only end when the opponent's breath was definitively cut off. Unless a whim arose, Mok Jae-un, who never left any loose ends, removed his hand from the evil commandment sword caught in Mujin's grasp and formed a sword of demonic energy with his sword fingers. Whoosh! As Mok Jae-un was about to behead him, Mujin gritted his teeth and abruptly kicked Mok Jae-un's chest. Thud. As a result, Mok Jae-un was sent flying backward and fell, while Mujin also plummeted at a fast speed, pushed back by the force of his kick. Thump. Landing on the ground, Mok Jae-un barely regained his posture and clicked his tongue. The heart was pierced not by an ordinary sword but by his own energy-infused plundering killing sword. He hadn't expected Mujin to have this much strength left. However, even that seemed difficult now. The staggering Mujin couldn't even properly stand up. Ugh. No matter how much of a monster he was, transcending the realm of humans, having his heart penetrated must be unimaginably agonizing. No, it was rather astonishing that he was still breathing. Of course, Mok Jae-un himself had survived even after his heart area was stabbed, but Mujin was penetrated not by a simple sword strike but by a ghost sword imbued with demonic energy. So how was he still enduring like this? Well, it didn't matter. Even with a tenacious life, he would have no choice but to die if his head was severed. Swish. Clack. The evil commandment sword was drawn into Mok Jae-un's hand. Grasping the evil commandment sword, Mok Jae-un swiftly leaped forward. Whoosh. With his figure blurring and scattering, Mok Jae-un reached Mujin's front in an instant and attempted to behead him with the evil commandment sword. Hover. Slam. Mok Jae-un, who was swinging the evil commandment sword imbued with black sword energy, abruptly stopped midway. As a result, a large claw-shaped sword mark about 10 jang long appeared outward in the direction he had been swinging the sword. Boom boom boom. It was evidence that he had swung the sword with all his might to behead Mujin, who possessed a body as indestructible as Vajra. Gulp. Mujin subconsciously swallowed dry saliva. Perhaps due to his innate boldness he didn't close his eyes, but the moment he perceived death, he couldn't help but feel tense involuntarily. At that moment Mok Jae-un spoke. What did you just say? At Mok Jae-un's question, Mujin stared at him intently. Could it be that he had stopped the sword because of those words? As Mujin wondered, Mok Jae-un asked again. What did you say? Swish. The sharp blade touched the skin of Mujin's neck. The ominous black sword energy on the blade seemed ready to behead him at any moment. Although Mujin didn't fear it, he spoke, feeling curious. Haha. I asked what your relationship is with the three-eyed. At his answer, a glint flashed in Mok Jae-un's eyes. As expected, it seemed he had correctly read Mujin's lip movements. Mok Jae-un had read Mujin's muttering with an incomprehensible expression while looking at the sword piercing his heart using the art of lip reading. Haha. Could it be, cough, that you stopped because of those words? The three-eyed you mentioned. Do you mean a being with a third eye on the forehead? At this question, Mujin furrowed his brows. How does this person know about the three-eyed his father mentioned? Then was his guess correct? It seems, cough cough, you really are related to the three-eyed. Otherwise this wound wouldn't be fug. Sizzle. Before he could finish speaking, steam began to flow from Mujin's body, and his blackened body gradually turned red. Along with that, Mujin continuously vomited blood. Blarg. The golden bracelet's ratchet on Mujin's right wrist turned. Click click click. The number on the ratchet rapidly increased and returned to 10. Then the steam from Mujin's body stopped and his face turned pale. Did he forcibly seal his energy? Mok Jae-un made that guess while looking at the bracelet on Mujin's right arm. As Mujin's momentum weakened, the bracelet seemed to suppress his energy as if it had been waiting. Having somewhat returned to a more human-like appearance, Mujin raised his head with great difficulty, his face even more agonized. His rough breathing made it seem like he would stop breathing at any moment. For a fleeting moment, Mok Jae-un fell into contemplation. Should he keep Mujin alive to learn something he knew about the three-eyed or not? However, Mujin was an extremely annoying opponent. Mok Jae-un himself had also considerably depleted his energy while fighting with all his might, so if he gave Mujin even the slightest chance to recover here, who knew what would happen? Kill him, Zheng Sheng. This guy is too dangerous. Even if it's not this monster-like fellow, there will be other opportunities to obtain information. Chong Ryong urged him to kill Mujin. Within the wooden figurine in Mok Jae-un's bosom, she had closely observed the fight more than anyone else. That's why she believed Mujin should never be given a chance to recover. However, let's hear him out first. What? Ha. Chong Ryong clicked her tongue at Mok Jae-un's stubbornness. She couldn't understand why he displayed such dangerous whims at times like this. At that moment, Mok Jae-un lightly waved his hand. Swish. Pop. The plundering killing sword that had been stabbed into Mujin's back, piercing his heart, was pulled out. Ugh. A scream burst from Mujin's mouth at the pain. From Mujin's perspective, it was the most extreme pain he had ever experienced in his life, so he couldn't help but suffer. His clan possessed innate physiques, so they were stronger against pain compared to others, and their sturdy bodies rarely sustained injuries. This applied not only externally but also internally. Moreover, even if they were wounded, their extraordinary recovery ability quickly healed the injured areas. However, strangely, the vicious and dark energy that had entered along with the sword piercing his heart and the peculiar evil nature of the sword interfered with his rapid recovery. I can't breathe. The penetration of the heart ultimately hindered the smooth circulation of blood, and Mujin could only approach death. It was at that very moment. Whoosh. The vicious energy that had been obstructing his recovery finally left his heart. Although the peculiar evil nature remained, the energy that had most hindered his recovery was gone, and the penetrated area slowly began to regenerate. And as the blood circulated, Mujin exhaled roughly as if his blocked breathing had burst open. Mok Jae-un said to him, "Seeing you breathe again after I only adjusted the demonic energy makes me contemplate my choice." Demonic energy. Yes. You can feel that energy that left your heart, right? At Mok Jae-un's words, a glint flashed in Mujin's eyes. Why? It must be out of necessity, right? Necessity? Could it be because of that three-eyed? No, what is your relationship with the three-eyed? Mujin, whose mind had suddenly cleared, asked Mok Jae-un. In response, Mok Jae-un moved the demonic energy within Mujin's body. As the vicious energy actively moved again, Mujin frowned. I haven't fully removed the demonic energy yet. Since it's near the heart, I can reinsert it. You mean you hold the upper hand? Mok Jaeongun replied with a smirk. If you understand, I hope you'll obediently answer my questions. Mujin stared intently at Mok Jaeongun. Although the evil nature that had remained in the sword piercing his heart was still hindering his recovery, if given a little more time, it seemed he could escape the critical condition. For now it was better to play along even if only for a short while. Ask away. How do you know about the three-eyed? You could say my clan has a bit of a bad history with him. A bit of a bad history? Both my great-grandfather and father fought against that three-eyed with an eye on his forehead, whether by coincidence or not. They fought against the three-eyed? At the unexpected answer, Mok Jaeongun's eyes turned peculiar. He had wondered what kind of relationship they had, but if Mujin's great-grandfather and father had fought against the three-eyed, weren't they essentially his enemies? At that moment, Mujin parted his lips and continued. What is your relationship with the three-eyed? I thought I made it clear that only I would ask the questions. You already hold the upper hand over my life, so can't you at least answer this much? Whoosh. Before he could finish speaking, the vicious energy surged into Mujin's heart, attempting to worsen the slowly recovering wound again. Slam. Ugh. As Mujin clutched his chest, Mok Jaeongun spoke with a smile. Despite your surprisingly excellent recovery ability, I hope you weren't under the mistaken impression that I would kindly allow the penetrated wound to heal. Haha. I had hoped for that, but it seems I shouldn't wish for it. I'm glad you understand. Whoosh. As the wound worsened again, Mok Jaeongun withdrew the demonic energy from Mujin's heart, causing his face to turn pale. Then he casually said, well, my relationship with the three-eyed is similar to yours. Phew. Similar, you say? Then do you mean you're also in a hostile relationship with the three-eyed? You could say that. But why do you possess a power similar to that three-eyed? Similar, you say? Mok Jaeongun tilted his head. What did he mean by that? As he wondered, Mujin spoke. Due to our clan's innate bodies, our wounds heal quickly, leaving no scars. However, that deformed person called the three-eyed left an indelible scar on my father's chest. You mean the scar never fully healed? Yes. At that answer, Mok Jaeongun stroked his chin. Just like the energy of death, which could be called death energy, the demonic energy born from it also possessed the property of destroying the opponent's energy. But did the three-eyed also possess a power similar to this, or one that hindered recovery? If this three-eyed was identical to the being he knew, it could be quite useful information. However, so you suspected I was related to the three-eyed because of that? Do you think there would be many individuals with such bizarre powers? Well, there's some truth to those words. But just like you, that three-eyed is related to the death of the one who raised me, so while being mortal enemies is possible, being on the same side is unlikely. Ah. At the mention of the death of the one who raised him, Mujin felt awkward for no reason. Then wouldn't that person be almost like a parent? Are they really unrelated? If the one who raised him was killed, as Mok Jaeongun said, they would be nothing less than mortal enemies. However, it was quite a coincidence that they possessed such similar powers. But upon reflection, there was no reason for Mok Jaeongun to interrogate him so persistently about the three-eyed if he held the upper hand and was on the same side as that being. So Mujin's doubts gradually dissipated. At that moment, Mok Jaeongun asked him, if there's anything else you know about the three-eyed, please tell me. There's nothing. Nothing, you say? Yes. That's all you have? Since you mentioned they fought against the three-eyed, don't you at least know why that person fought against your clan or what purpose they clashed for? I really don't know. All I know is that the three-eyed infiltrated the place where our clan resides and was driven away by my father. At these words, one of Mok Jaeongun's eyebrows rose. He had thought Mujin might possess some useful information, but it was disappointingly lacking. If this was truly all, there was no point in further conversation. If that's all, it's unfortunate. If you had more useful information, I could have spared your life in exchange. That's uncertain. To the hesitant Mujin, Mok Jaeongun spoke with a chilling smile. That's the correct answer. You are a significant hindrance to my work. Flinch. At the strong malice he felt for the first time, Mujin momentarily shuddered. He had never encountered someone like this in his life. With concern, Mujin stared at him and spoke. Even if the three-eyed may be your mortal enemy, as you said, why do you show such hostility towards the Tang clan? Are you trying to eradicate the Tang clan? Depending on the situation, yes. Grip. At those words, Mujin clenched his fists tightly. This person was too dangerous. Not only was he powerful, but if he possessed such chilling malice, he might truly annihilate the Tang clan. Seeing Mujin clench his fists, Mok Jiangun also spoke with a sneer. I don't understand why you're trying so hard to protect the Tang clan. What is your relationship with them? We're distant relatives, so we're not unrelated. Distant relatives? Yes, distant relatives. So you're trying to protect them because they're essentially your bloodline? Although distant, does one need more reason to protect family? At those words, Mok Jiangun chuckled. Is that so? Then what do you think about a bloodline that killed someone who was essentially family, even if distant? What do you mean by that? In response to his reaction, Mok Jiangun spoke in a meaningful voice. The one who raised me belonged to one of the Tang clan's branch families, sharing that bloodline. However, the person known as the Tang clan's patriarch killed that individual with the formless poison. Chapter 338. Mastermind 5. On a mountain peak not far from the Sichuan Tang clan's estate. Oh my! An elderly, hunched woman leaning on a cane was left dumbfounded. And for good reason. Anyone witnessing this tremendous duel would be astonished. This had already surpassed the level of ordinary martial artists. It was literally a confrontation between superhumans. Boom 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 boom. Every time they swung their swords or fists, everything around them shattered and split apart in utter chaos. The surroundings had already been reduced to ruins, with not a single place left intact. Seeing this, the hunched old woman, her mouth agape, clicked her tongue and spoke. Lady Chunchu. It seems they have already transcended the realm of humans. Indeed. Beside the old woman stood a woman with half-black and half-white hair. Dressed in a provocative yet bright yellow attire reminiscent of rapeseed flowers, revealing her cleavage, she was both mysterious and incomparably beautiful. As her voice sounded somewhat subdued, the old woman, thinking she might be in a foul mood, cautiously glanced to the side. But something seemed strange. Lady Chunchu's eyes, which were observing their duel, sparkled with fascination and interest. Has she developed an interest? She was the most emotional among the executives of her realm. As a result, she was quite capricious and prone to mood swings, so it was difficult to understand why she was showing interest now. She had been unable to hide her disappointment when Suk Peung, the Green Forest gambling king, whom she had considered a useful piece and invested in, lost his fighting spirit with just a single punch. But her current reaction was completely opposite. Is it because of that monstrous human fighting against the hidden power of the Tang clan? The old woman's guess was none other than that human. While the hidden power of the Tang clan was astonishing, that suddenly appeared human was also no pushover. When the monstrous hidden power of the Tang clan began to fully unleash its strength, Lady Chunchu had said with a surprised expression. He's strong. With this level of power he wouldn't be inferior even when compared to the 6 heavens, let alone the 8 stars. A 6 heavens, you say? The 6 heavens were considered the pinnacle among martial artists. But did those unknown individuals possess strength comparable to such formidable figures? How had they never been caught by their intelligence network? It was truly astonishing. Now it made sense why that person remained seated, maintaining caution. The Central Plains was not a place to be taken lightly. However, the old woman let out an exclamation as she watched the duel. Their fight was reaching its climax. Who would emerge victorious? They were such fierce rivals that it wouldn't be surprising regardless of who won, making it difficult to predict. But eventually a winner was determined. And the victor was... How can this be? Contrary to expectations, it was not the hidden power of the Tang clan but the one wielding that vicious energy who emerged victorious. In that case there was only one thing for them to do. Lady Chunchu. As you said, now is our chance. Fisherman's gain. It was a saying that a third party could benefit from the fight between a crane and a clam, meaning an outsider could profit from their conflict. What they had been aiming for was precisely this fisherman's gain. At first it was simply to gauge the level of the hidden power. However, since it was a fight between fierce rivals regardless of who won, the depletion of true energy would be severe, making it a perfect opportunity to exploit their vulnerability. But, no. Pardon. I changed my mind. The old woman stared at her with a dumbfounded expression. Why would she let go of such a great opportunity? Right now they could easily deal with them or capture and subdue them. If they could eliminate the hidden power of the Tang clan that even that person couldn't rashly touch and secure that unknown supreme master, they could make a tremendous contribution to the organization. Lady Chun Chu. I said no. But this excellent opportunity, how can you? Because it's an excellent opportunity. Pardon? That guy. I want him. That guy. You don't mean the hidden power of the Tang clan. No, that guy. Reflected in her gray-tinted pupils was none other than Mok Jiangun. There's no need to invest in other things. If we eliminate everything else and have just that guy, wouldn't that be enough? At her words, the old woman couldn't help but feel restless. She hadn't anticipated that Lady Chun Chu would show such whimsical behavior at this crucial moment. Was it because her greed couldn't be controlled once awakened? The old woman carefully spoke as if advising her. Lady Chun Chu. If you truly want him, you should seize the opportunity. If you can easily obtain him, there's no need to postpone it to next time. You think I wouldn't be able to get my hands on him unless he's weakened? That's. The old woman realized her mistake. She had touched upon Lady Chun Chu's pride. No, that's not it. How could that be possible? If Lady Chun Chu puts her mind to it, it's definitely possible. Didn't I tell you? Men are simple creatures. Indeed. Just watch. With the right opportunity, I can easily turn him into a slave. She had already made up her mind. Realizing that further discussion would be meaningless, the old woman closed her mouth. Perhaps it would be better to secretly report these two individuals to the council. At that moment, Lady Chun Chu spoke in a warning tone. I'm telling you in advance, if you secretly report to the council again without permission like last time, I definitely won't let it slide. Gulp. The old woman swallowed dry saliva with a tense expression. The one who raised me belonged to one of the Tang clan's branch families, sharing that bloodline. However, the person known as the Tang clan's patriarch killed that individual with the formless poison. Mujin's expression hardened. He had wondered what Mok Jiangun was trying to say when he mentioned someone who was like family. But what on earth was this? If the one who raised him was from a branch family of the Tang clan, wouldn't that make them the main family and branch family? Was he saying the Tang clan's patriarch killed that person with poison? Right now. It's exactly as you heard. The Tang clan's patriarch killed the one who raised me. Why would he do such a thing? I don't know either. As for why that person killed my grandfather, could there have been a misunderstanding? If the formless poison, known to have been perfected only by the Tang clan, was used, what misunderstanding or excuse is there? At those words, Mujin hurriedly spoke. Wait, how can you distinguish whether it was the formless poison or not? I learned about poisons, so how could I not know? As soon as he finished speaking, Mok Jiangun raised poisonous energy with his left hand. The purple poisonous energy rising from his left hand left Mujin at a loss for words. He had mastered the art of poison as well. Although his clan had strong resistance to poisons, rendering the art of poison ineffective against them, Mok Jiangun's swordsmanship had already reached the pinnacle, and now even his poison techniques were at this level, which was astonishing. Swish. Mok Jiangun suppressed the poisonous energy and continued speaking. According to your logic, even if it's distant, it's like a dispute between family members, so will you keep interfering? Faced with this question, Mujin couldn't say anything further. Within the Tang clan they might distinguish between the main family and branch families, but from his perspective as someone who protected the Tang clan due to the dying wish of his ancestor, they were all part of the Tang clan. The dying wish was to protect the Tang clan if there were enemies threatening them. However, there was no dying wish regarding internal conflicts within the Tang clan. This is the first time encountering such a situation. What should I do? Mujin couldn't help but feel perplexed. If his hostility stemmed from an internal matter within the Tang clan, it wouldn't be right for him to interfere. Rather, it felt like fighting until now had been a futile act. But there was one thing he needed to ascertain. I need to verify if it's true or not. The possibility that this person's words were lies couldn't be ruled out. With words alone, anyone could say anything. If everything he said now turned out to be lies, he would be deceived, and the worst-case scenario would unfold for the Tang clan. Therefore Mujin spoke. If your words are true, then this is an internal matter of the Tang clan, so it's not something I should rashly interfere with. Oh, you accepted it readily. If I had known, I should have engaged in more conversation. But how will you prove that it's true? Prove. Mok Jae-un retorted, raising one eyebrow. Nevertheless, Mujin continued with what he was saying. How can I know if the one who raised you is really a branch family of the Tang clan or not? This was the most important point. If they were truly a branch family, there would be some way to prove it. However, at this question, Mok Jae-un chuckled and said, I'm already providing the ultimate proof. The ultimate proof? The fact that I'm having this conversation instead of killing you right away, isn't that the ultimate proof? At Mok Jae-un's words, Mujin furrowed his brows. It was truly peculiar. If someone else had said this, it could be dismissed as somewhat far-fetched, but instead, these words resonated even more deeply. Hearing you talk about proof and whatnot, it seems I've done something unnecessary. It would be better to just kill you like this. Swish. Interrupting his own words, Mok Jae-un turned his head. It was in the direction of the Tang clan's estate. As Mok Jae-un suddenly looked toward the estate, the Tang clan's executives and warriors, who had been observing them while holding their breath, became extremely tense. However, Mok Jae-un wasn't looking at them. To be precise, it was beyond them. After gazing in that direction, Mok Jae-un turned his head back to Mujin and spoke with a smirk. This is fortunate. You said you needed proof, right? Bam. Ugh. Ugh. The two individuals who had been engaged in a fierce exchange for over 30 seconds without giving an inch, each landed a blow on the other's chest and face, causing them to be pushed back by the recoil. Crash. Boom. Crack. As the body of the 8-poison snake staff Gyeongso was flung back and collided with a tree, the trunk snapped and melted away due to the intense poisonous energy. Sizzle. Ha ha ha. Swish. Gyeongso wiped the blood flowing from the corner of his mouth. Then he glared at Tang In-hae, the patriarch of the Sichuan Tang clan, who had been pushed back about 10 steps and was regaining his posture just like him. As expected, he's not easy to deal with. Even after unleashing the 8 poisons realm, where even his hair turned green due to the poisonous energy, he couldn't gain the upper hand at all. Despite not neglecting his cultivation at all, the fact that they were still equals meant that his opponent had also steadily improved his martial arts over the years. This won't be easy. In the end, the key is the secret technique. Realizing that the battle wouldn't be decided like this, Gyeongso thought he couldn't continue this way. The same was true for his longtime rival, the Tang clan patriarch Tang In-hae. PFT. Spit. Tang In-hae spat out a broken molar and inwardly clicked his tongue. How could that old geezer not weaken with age but instead grow stronger? It was truly incomprehensible. Moreover, unlike their previous duels, this time he was charging at him as if his life depended on it, and each move was extremely lethal. In a duel between masters of the poisonous arts, each move was critical, unlike ordinary masters. Since each move was a poisonous technique, immediate detoxification was necessary upon being hit, resulting in a much greater depletion of energy. That's why Tang In-hae had always wanted to avoid a confrontation with Gyeongso. This won't do. I don't have much left, but to quickly end this, I need to unleash the Formless Poison Technique. The Formless Poison Technique. It was the Tang clan's greatest secret technique, developed over 3 generations from his grandfather to his father. Having made up his mind, Tang In-hae assumed the stance for the Formless Poison Technique. Suddenly, the indigo-colored poisonous energy flowing from his entire body disappeared, and his surroundings began to waver and ripple like a mirage. Croak, croak. On the other hand, Gyeongso's throat swelled up like a toad's, as if ready to burst out at any moment, and his momentum was not ordinary. His entire body was engulfed in green poisonous energy, and the surroundings were gradually melting away as the poisonous energy continued to converge. Sizzle, sizzle, sizzle. Faced with their imposing auras, Mok Jae-un's subordinates held their breath and observed. The confrontation was between one of the 8 stars, who could be considered the top masters of the martial arts world, and a supreme master of poisonous arts from the western regions who was not inferior to him. They couldn't take their eyes off them. As the 2 supreme masters glared at each other waiting for an opportunity, it was at that very moment. Swish. Thud. Someone descended from the sky and landed where they were. Pai Lord. It was none other than Mok Jae-un. At this sound, Tang In-hae, the Tang clan patriarch, momentarily startled, involuntarily glanced in that direction. However, Tang In-hei, who had turned his gaze, widened his eyes, unable to hide his bewilderment. Not only was Mok Jiangun there, but also Mu Jin of the Yu clan, who could be considered the guardian of the Tang clan, was beside him. What is this? Chapter 339, Mastermind 6. Tang In-hei, the patriarch of the Sichuan Tang clan, couldn't hide his bewilderment. Since they were thoroughly opposed to each other, he had thought they would fight to the death, with only one of them surviving. But why did the one known as the guardian of the Tang clan appear alongside the person mentioned in the Holy Fire Priestess's prophecy? Unable to comprehend the situation, Tang In-hei's mind was thrown into confusion. What on earth was happening? At that very moment. Foolish of you to be distracted in front of this old man. Flinch. Startled by the resounding rebuke, Tang In-hei turned his gaze. At that instant, as if a toad had been waiting for its prey, the 8-poison snake staff Gyeongso unleashed a pair of palms imbued with tremendous momentum and poisonous energy. Toad Poison Technique Secret Art. 8 Poisons Domination. Boom. Oh no. Tang In-hei's eyes wavered as he realized he had been caught off guard and lost the initiative. If he didn't handle this carefully, he might lose his life not to the person from the prophecy but to this old man. Whoosh. Despite the panic, Tang In-hei maintained his composure and tried to create distance by leaping backward. Of course, Gyeongso had no intention of letting him escape and immediately pursued him. Incredible. For a fleeting moment, Tang In-hei couldn't help but marvel at the flawless and tremendous poison palm technique and its momentum. Naturally, compared to before, Gyeongso's power had risen, and Tang In-hei could feel the increased sophistication of his techniques and the growth of his martial power. However, he could tell that this move was thoroughly designed to target him. Realizing that Gyeongso had taken all their previous duels as a stepping stone and honed this technique solely for this moment, Tang In-hei had no choice but to acknowledge it. He created it solely to make me submit thoroughly. If it had been him just a few months ago, he would have had no way to block this technique. But after a few real battles, he had nearly perfected it. Formless Poison Technique. 9 Bereavements Dark Grievance. Whoosh. Tang In-hei, his entire body seeming to ripple like a mirage, stopped retreating and boldly leaped forward. The foundation of the poisonous arts was to internalize poison within the body and emit it along with one's energy. Therefore, the power and momentum of the poisonous arts varied depending on how strong and abundant the internalized poison was. Old Gyeong. I have no choice but to win this match. Until now, no one in the Tang clan had ever internalized the formless poison as a poisonous art. However, over 3 generations, they had systematized a way to internalize the formless poison, and based on that he had perfected the formless poison technique. It was regrettable that there wasn't much formless poison left, but he was confident that this formless poison technique was invincible. Old man, this is the end. Seeing the resolve in Tang In-hei's eyes, Gyeongso steeled his determination. From the moment the color of the poisonous energy turned colorless, he had suspected that Tang In-hei might have become capable of wielding the formless poison, so he had already prepared to risk his life. It doesn't matter. Anyway, this was also within expectations. Even if I succumb to the formless poison, this old man will win the duel. Sacrificing flesh to gain the bone. There was a saying about giving up one's flesh to obtain the bone. Gyeongso was determined to sacrifice his own life and seize victory in this final duel. To remain the undisputed master of poisonous arts in this era. That was his final wish. Boom. Thus, the 2 masters of poisonous arts were about to collide. It was at that very moment. Slam. Just as they were about to clash, someone intervened between them. It was none other than Mok Jiangun. What? Young Master Mok? Mok Jiangun grabbed Gyeongso's wrist as he unleashed the palms of the toad poison technique and flung him upward. Crash. Ugh. No matter how much of a secret art it was, in an unexpected situation, Gyeongso's body was sent flying up to 5 jang in height since his martial power was inherently inferior to Mok Jiangun's. Slam. At the same time, Mok Jiangun and Tang In-hei's palms collided. Upon impact, Tang In-hei's face turned red and blue, and he was sent flying backward. Just like Gyeongso, since he was inferior in martial power, the moment their palms collided, internal pressure surged from within. Whoosh. The repelled Tang In-hei was pushed back more than 10 steps before he could stop. Although it was just a single collision, his 5 viscera and 6 bowels were boiling, and it felt like blood would surge up at any moment. That monster. Tang In-hei inwardly clicked his tongue. He knew that Mok Jaeong-un had just fought against the Yu clan, who could be considered the guardians of the Tang clan. The depletion of his true energy must have been tremendous, yet he still had this much strength left. However, while suppressing his inner turmoil, the corners of Tang In-hei's mouth twitched. An unexpected fortune had occurred. Originally, that palm strike should have hit that old man Gyeong Sao, but Mok Jaeong-un had taken it instead. He felt like cheering inwardly. Foolish bastard. He didn't know why Mok Jaeong-un had intervened, but since he had received the formless poison with his bare body, it was over. His grandfather, the Thousand Poison Hands Tang Yunjong, had said that even if he were a supreme master who had reached the pinnacle of internal energy, if he were poisoned by the formless poison he would not survive. That's how much the formless poison was the epitome of poison. No matter how high a realm a supreme master had reached, if properly exposed to this poison, detoxification was impossible. The only variable was that since this was the first time someone who had surpassed the wall's wall and reached the realm of a great master had been afflicted by the formless poison, it was difficult to estimate how long they could endure. Thud. At that moment Gyeong Sao, who had soared into the air, landed on the ground. Landing, Gyeong Sao spoke to Mok Jaeong-un with a perplexed expression as if in protest. Young Master Mok, isn't this different from our agreement? The agreement he had received from Mok Jaeong-un was simple. To let him have a final duel with Tang In-hei, the Tang clan patriarch, without anyone's interference. However, he had never anticipated that Mok Jaeong-un, who had made the agreement, would intervene midway. In response, Mok Jaeong-un shrugged his shoulders and said, "Well, what agreement did I violate? No. Intervening during the duel. If I hadn't intervened, you would have certainly lost your life. It's a duel, young master. Have you already forgotten the price you paid to make a deal with me? What did I say back then?" That's. Gyeong Sao couldn't bring himself to finish his sentence. Thanks to Mok Jaeong-un, he had been able to lose his face instead of his life and escape the organization's attention by becoming a dead man. Because he had become a dead man, his family would no longer be threatened. As a result, Gyeong Sao had vowed to dedicate the rest of his life to Mok Jaeong-un if he could fulfill just one wish. Throwing away your life before paying the price is a violation, isn't it? At Mok Jaeong-un's words, Gyeong Sao couldn't give any response. After all, it was unlikely that a supreme master who had reached the realm of a great master like Mok Jaeong-un would fail to read his intention of sacrificing his flesh to gain the bone. That's why he had intervened. With this, Gyeong Sao's gaze naturally shifted to Mok Jaeong-un's hand. Although he hadn't seen it clearly, it seemed that Mok Jaeong-un had not only disrupted his secret art but also collided with Tang In-hei. Surely he didn't directly collide? He thought that the person who had stepped in to save him wouldn't have done something so reckless. For every poison there was an antidote, but the exception to that was the formless poison. Since young Master Mok also had some knowledge about poisons, he believed he would have noticed that Tang In-hei had internalized the formless poison to wield it as a poisonous art. At that moment, "May I call you young Master Yu?" Tang In-hei, with his arms crossed, called out to Mujin, who was observing the scene. In response, Mujin spoke. "I'm Mujin. Call me whatever you like." "It's a pleasure to meet you, young Master Mujin. As you can see, given the situation, I couldn't properly greet you, so I apologize for that. There's no need to mind such things. Thank you for your understanding. Since the matter is urgent, I'll get straight to the point. If I'm not mistaken, the Yu clan has been protecting our clan like a shadow for generations. Am I right?" "Let's say that's the case." The somewhat lukewarm tone made Tang In-hei inwardly puzzled. Why was he showing such a half-hearted attitude? As far as he knew, regardless of what he did, the Yu clan had a duty to protect him and the Tang clan according to the dying wish of their ancestors. Finding this strange, Tang In-hei continued with what he was saying. "But why are you together with that vicious beast who is trying to threaten our clan? I'm asking just in case, but surely the Yu clan hasn't abandoned the duty upheld by their ancestors, right?" At these words, Mujin scoffed. "Duty? Young master. You seem to be misunderstanding something, clan leader." "Misunderstanding? What do you mean?" "I find it quite unpleasant that you're talking as if our Yu clan is some sort of subordinate to the Tang clan. You seem to regard the fact that we protect you because of the ties with our ancestor's wife and her dying wish as some kind of master-servant relationship. Flinch. At Mujin's words, which carried a sharp undertone, Tang In-hei seemed to realize his mistake and waved his hands, saying, "It's a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding. I absolutely didn't mean it that way. I was just perplexed that you were together with that vicious beast who was fighting against our clan, so I asked just in case. If I offended you, I, the clan leader, will apologize like this." Clap. Tang In-hei clasped his hands together and even performed a formal salute to appease Mujin. Although Mok Jiongun had been exposed to the formless poison, the situation was still numerically disadvantageous, so he had to make sure to bring Mujin to his side. At that moment Mujin spoke. "You said you were perplexed that we were together. Well, there's something I'd like to ask the Tang clan leader." "Ask? What is it? Is there any reason for me to interfere in the Tang clan's internal strife?" At Mujin's words, Tang In-hei furrowed his brows. Now the mystery of why they had come here together was solved. It seemed that when that monster couldn't easily win against Mujin, he had deceived him with sweet words. With this, Tang In-hei carefully spoke. "Internal strife of the Tang clan? It's a misunderstanding. That person is not a member of our clan, so how can you characterize it as an internal strife? Not a member of the Tang clan? From what I've heard, the one who raised him was from a branch family of the Tang clan. He can no longer be considered a branch family. How can someone who joined a cult group that incites the people be considered a member of our clan? A cult group that incites the people? You must have heard of the religious group called the Fire Faith Order. They teach strange doctrines to innocent people and lure them astray." "The Fire Faith Order? You know about them too, don't you? And strictly speaking, that person is someone who was practically kidnapped and raised by someone unrelated to our clan because he fell into the Fire Faith Order and believed in some prophecy or whatnot." "Kidnapped, you say?" "That's right. A member of a cult group who hasn't inherited a drop of the Tang clan's blood is maliciously targeting our clan for some unknown reason. So how can this be an internal strife? Would this be enough to bring Mujin back to his side? At the very least, now that Mujin knew about the Fire Faith Order's involvement, which was being oppressed as a cult group, he would develop some animosity as a resident of the Central Plains. However, Mujin tilted his head and said, "Clan leader. Has the misunderstanding been somewhat cleared now? It's strange. For someone who said he joined the Fire Faith Order and is no longer a member of the Tang clan, you seem to know a lot about him. You even confidently identified the specific person who raised him, even though I haven't mentioned who it is yet." For a moment Tang In-hei was at a loss for words. What was this? His intention was to inform Mujin that Mok Jiongun and Zhang Munno, the elder of the Heong sect, were involved with the Fire Faith Order, in order to instill animosity in Mujin. However, Mujin showed no interest in the Fire Faith Order at all. "Young master. What's important is not that. This is about the Fire Faith Order. Regardless of the Fire Faith Order, there are more than a couple of things that don't add up. What the hell is wrong with this bastard?" Faced with Mujin's tone and gaze filled with suspicion, Tang In-hei's mind became complicated. It was a completely different reaction than he had intended. Contrary to his expectation that Mujin would develop animosity and return to his side because of the Fire Faith Order, his suspicion toward Tang In-hei had grown even stronger. Why was he focusing on other aspects instead of the Fire Faith Order? "I need to calm down." Tang In-hei, realizing that if he faltered here he would be unable to handle the situation, tried to calmly resolve the matter. "Young Master Mujin, I understand what you're trying to say. There might be some parts of what I said that don't make sense. But I can explain everything, so first." Is that so? Then how will you explain this?" "Explain what? I can explain as much as you want, so please tell me." With this, Mujin stared sharply at him and spoke in a meaningful voice. "While I was risking my life fighting to protect the Tang clan, why was the person known as the Tang clan leader secretly trying to run away alone?" At that question, Tang In-hei's expression froze like stone. He might not know about other things, but this was something he absolutely couldn't explain. Surrounded on all sides, he realized he had no more room for choice. Damn it. The only way to escape this situation was to exhaust all the remaining formless poison and... Bam. It was at that very moment. Someone grabbed the back of Tang In-hei's head and slammed his face into the ground. The force was so strong that not only his face but his entire head was buried in the ground. The one pressing down on the back of his squirming head was none other than Mok Jiangun. From now on, let me handle this. Chapter 340, To Offer 1. From now on, let me handle this. The one pressing down on the back of the head of the squirming Tang clan leader Tang In-hei, whose face was buried in the ground, was none other than Mok Jiangun. At his words, Mujin nodded and stepped back. Anyway, since his trust in the Tang clan leader Tang In-hei had fallen, he had no desire to continue the conversation. Moreover, I need to stabilize myself. Although Mok Jiangun had controlled the demonic energy, the strange evil nature remaining in his heart continued to hinder his recovery, and the wound in his heart hadn't healed yet, causing a stinging sensation with each breath. It seemed he needed to urgently expel the evil nature from his body. As Mujin stepped back, Mok Jiangun, who had been pressing down on Tang In-hei's head, signaled to someone with his eyes. It was Seop Chun. With quick wit, Seop Chun understood Mok Jiangun's intention with just a glance. Creak. Approaching the carriage Tang In-hei had been riding, Seop Chun's eyes glinted as he opened the door. Inside the carriage, along with several boxes containing weapons, hidden weapons and poison materials, a woman with elegant features and short hair was sleeping. Swish. She's not asleep? Seop Chun, who checked her pulse, could tell that her acupuncture points had been suppressed. He was about to release them immediately, but for now he carried her out. My lord. There were weapons, poison materials and this woman inside. I see. I don't know who she is. Judging from the fact that she was put into a coma by suppressing her acupuncture points, it seems they didn't have a very friendly relationship. Acupuncture points. Thud. Soon Mok Jiangun removed his hand from the head he had been pressing down on. Wriggling and struggling, Tang clan leader Tang In-hei raised his head. His face, covered in countless sand fragments and blood, gnashed his teeth and tried to twist his body. Hover. Thud. Ugh. Mok Jiangun kicked his shoulder and pressed down on him, causing him to fail. To the immobilized Tang In-hei, Mok Jiangun spoke. From what I heard earlier, it seems you roughly know who I am, so we can skip the introductions. At the calm voice, Tang clan leader Tang In-hei's mind became complicated. Where did things go wrong? He had contemplated for a long time, so there were no flaws in his plan. There were no disruptive factors, so why was this bastard still alive? It was utterly incomprehensible. At that moment, Mok Jiangun asked him, "Who is she?" "That woman you were trying to take with you, even suppressing her acupuncture points." Keeping your mouth shut doesn't seem like a good choice. There's no one left to protect you anymore. Protect. Gnash. At Mok Jiangun's words, Tang clan leader Tang In-hei gnashed his teeth. How did he end up being told about protection? As one of the 8 stars considered the top masters of the martial arts world and the leader of a martial clan, it was too humiliating to suffer such insults. He wanted to tear this bastard's limbs apart and kill him for trampling on his pride. However, he gritted his teeth even harder and suppressed his urge to vent his anger. Getting angry here wouldn't solve the problem. He had to maintain his composure as much as possible to create an opportunity. Moreover, I still have that. The formless poison, the symbol of the Sichuan Tang clan and considered the most perfect poison. Not much of it remained, but there was still enough to use the secret technique. Furthermore, this bastard had been exposed to the formless poison when he collided with Tang In-hei's palm. Despite his profound internal energy, he hadn't directly detoxified it and seemed to be enduring it for now, but he would soon realize the true terror of the formless poison. Even Zhang Munno, who raised you, died in agony. Do you think you'll be any different? Soon you'll be crawling on the ground, begging for your life. Of course, there was no way to save him. The formless poison was a lethal poison with no antidote, so once poisoned, it was the end. At that moment, Mok Jiangun spoke. That's right. It would have been quite disappointing if you had surrendered too easily. I feel like I need to make my grandfather proud by making all sorts of sounds come out of that mouth of yours. Swish. Mok Jiangun turned his head and signaled with his eyes to the heretic monk Jia Jiamzhong, who was sitting on the driver's seat of the carriage they had ridden. Hee. Jia Jiamzhong took a sip from his gourd and opened the carriage door. Then someone stepped out from inside. It was an elderly woman, none other than the Holy Fire Priestess. At the Holy Fire Priestess's appearance, The eyes of Tang In-hei, who had been keeping his mouth shut, wavered. How was that woman here? As far as he knew, the Holy Fire Priestess was supposed to be imprisoned in the palace's gold jade prison. But why was she with them? At that moment, Song My Song, the Holy Fire Priestess, upon spotting Yi Song-ah in Seop Chun's arms, shouted with teary eyes. On the way here she had only been thinking about her granddaughter. But seeing her granddaughter unconscious, she was about to rush over with a worried heart. However, old nun, stay put. The heretic monk Jia Jiamzhong blocked her from going. This was because Mok Jiangun had shaken his head. The Holy Fire Priestess raised her voice and shouted. Young Master Mok. My granddaughter, why is my granddaughter like that? Could it be? Her acupuncture points have been suppressed, so calm down. Acupuncture points? You can think of it as her being unconscious. Seop Chun informed her that her granddaughter was safe. At those words, the Holy Fire Priestess turned her head with an incomprehensible expression and spoke to the Tang clan leader Tang In-hei. Clan leader Tang. What in the world is going on? At her question, Tang clan leader Tang In-hei gritted his teeth without answering. He had heard that as a key figure of the Fire Faith Order, she would never be released from the palace's gold jade prison until her death. But this bastard had even taken her out, so he seemed to have made up his mind. Mok Jiangun said to him, I had a hunch, but she really was the Holy Fire Priestess's granddaughter. What a peculiar person you are. The one who abandoned his clan members and tried to flee as soon as I appeared thought of taking the Holy Fire Priestess's granddaughter with him. There must be a special reason for trying to take the granddaughter with you. What could that reason be? Well, of course you won't say. As he looked at the Holy Fire Priestess, she also avoided eye contact with Mok Jiangun, her eyes trembling. Seeing their attitudes, the corners of Mok Jiangun's mouth twitched. It was a simple gesture, but through this Mok Jiangun could infer one fact. I already had a feeling that the Holy Fire Priestess was hiding something more from me. I was pondering what it could be, but I found the answer. At Mok Jiangun's words, the Holy Fire Priestess couldn't help but feel restless. She became anxious, wondering if he had noticed that. Then Mok Jiangun spoke. I don't know if it's because of bloodline or some other reason, but the foresight ability you lost. It seems your granddaughter inherited it. At those words, the Holy Fire Priestess was so surprised that she couldn't hide her bewilderment. She had desperately kept this hidden above all else. In fact, among the members of the Fire Faith Order, no one knew that she had lost her ability and that it had been transferred to her granddaughter. She had kept it hidden until the end, knowing that if it became known that the ability had been transferred, her granddaughter would become a target. But this man was truly terrifying. His insight to infer the truth from just a few circumstances was too outstanding. Young Master Mok. That's... Stay quiet. Grip. Ugh. Mok Jiangun pressed down harder on Tang clan leader Tang In-hei's back and spoke. You abandoned your clan members, but you cherished the one with foresight ability enough to try to take her with you at any cost, right? Impressive. What? I've met quite a few people while coming down from the mountain to find the real culprit, but you're the first one whose greed is so outstanding. Originally, I was thinking of peeling off the skin of the Tang clan's family members one by one in front of you or the Holy Fire Priestess, neatly spreading their flesh and then extracting their bones piece by piece and grinding them up. Shudder. Why, you bastard, what nonsense are you spewing? Unable to keep his mouth shut any longer, Tang In-hei spoke out in disbelief. How could such chilling words come out of a human's mouth? No matter how much of an enemy he was for killing the grandfather who raised him, it was hard to endure. I thought it might be a waste of time since you seem quite selfishly greedy, but I guess that's not the case. I can give you enough suffering. Are you truly insane? How can a human mouth utter such words that even beasts wouldn't? Crack. Arg. Before he could finish speaking, a scream burst out of Tang In-hei's mouth along with the sound of bones breaking. It seemed that the right rib Mok Jiangun was stepping on had broken. As he was suffering, Mok Jiangun removed his foot from Tang In-hei's back. This caught Tang In-hei's attention. What? Why did he take his foot off his back? It was one of the main acupuncture points, and although he was being pressed down by overwhelming martial power, he had been enduring it intentionally, waiting for the formless poison to spread. Thud. Ugh. At that moment Mok Jae-un kicked him and his body was involuntarily raised. Holding the area around his broken rib, Tang In-hae straightened his posture and looked at Mok Jae-un. Huh. Mok Jae-un was standing with his hands behind his back, looking very arrogant. It was as if he was looking at a lowly being, no, a crawling insect. Feeling extremely unpleasant, Mok Jae-un opened his mouth. Try it. What? I wasn't pressing down that hard, but since you've been forcibly enduring it and constantly looking for an opportunity, consider this my last act of mercy. Mercy? Nash. At the mention of showing mercy, Tang In-hae's face twisted terribly. He was so infuriated. Even though Mok Jae-un possessed martial arts comparable to the Six Heavens, to humiliate him like this. Moreover, in front of the 8 poison snake staff Gyeong-so, who could be considered his arch-rival. Clap. Rumble. Unable to endure any longer, Tang In-hae assumed a stance and drew upon the poisonous energy of the formless poison technique. The bastard would die from the formless poison soon, but he had changed his mind. He would make that moment come even faster. At that moment, Gyeong-so, wearing the human skin mask, shouted at Mok Jae-un. Young Master Mok. You must never collide with him. The formless poison has no antidote, so create some distance. Too late. Whoosh. Tang clan leader Tang In-hae leaped forward. The formless poison technique wasn't simply about creating distance, as there were secret techniques to deal with distant enemies as well. One of them was the circular luxuriant poison formation. Swish. At that moment, Tang In-hae's body suddenly fell forward. Even though he wanted to regain his posture, he couldn't. Slice. His thighs were split open and his 2 legs were severed from his body. With his legs cut off, Tang In-hae fell forward, and in his agony he looked at Mok Jae-un with disbelief. Just moments ago he had talked about giving him a final chance to fight, even touching his pride, so what the hell was this? But then Tang In-hae's expression froze. Through his eyes he could see Mok Jae-un laughing with a chilling face. Why, you bastard? Sorry about that. Seeing your dumbfounded expression made me laugh. You clearly said you'd give me a chance. A chance. Yes. But why in this way? You're asking why I suddenly cut off your legs? Don't tell me you're asking because you don't know. What? Mok Jae-un stopped laughing and spoke in a cold voice. I'm toying with you right now.